Huston Smelley provides the church with another evaluation of the Christian doctrine of Calvinism from someone who is not inside the Calvinistic worldview, but approaches the doctrine as an outsider in Deconstructing Calvinism. While much of the book is a standard walkthrough on the 5 famous points of Calvinism known as TULIP, this book really shines in the beginning and the final chapters of the book. His writing on God's decrees from a deterministic perspective and on how Jesus' own words contradict Calvinism is where Hutson is at his best. The goal of Deconstructing Calvinism is to prove a simple premise. Calvinism is completely inferential. There is no direct passage, not a single one in all of the Bible that proves any of the 5 main points of Calvinism. The entire theological structure is built by tying together multiple unrelated passages to create a system that the Bible itself never supports in a single one of its over 31,000 verses. Welcome to Rev Reads, your home for book reviews from the perspective of a pastor. If you're new to the channel and want to discover more eye-opening and revealing books, I would encourage you to subscribe to the channel so that you can stay up to date with our most current reviews. If you're a regular of the channel, please like and share this video. A little thumbs up goes a long way in helping others discover the quality work of Huston Smelley. And please consider supporting the work done here at Rev Reads by becoming a patron of the channel at patreon.com/RevReads. Deconstructing Calvinism did a fine job walking from verse to verse that's used to support Calvinism in order to show that none of them, even the favorite pillar passages of Calvinists, none of them back up the claims of Calvin. In the body of the book, Hutson covers total depravity to perseverance of the saints, with both skill and thoroughness. The biggest problem with those central chapters is that there are other chapters who have done the same work with equal skill. The best in this book is where Hutson stands apart from the other group of critics of Calvinism in his own treatment on God's decrees. I actually found myself struggling with both anger and depression during that section. Anger over theologians who defame God's holy name and compassionate character by making God the author of everything, including sin. And then depression that I used to believe and teach this nonsense. If God's sovereignty means that God predetermined everything without exception, we need to put every loving action at the feet of God. And not only every loving action, but also every hateful, evil, vile, and destructive action at the feet of God as well. It doesn't matter if God has a passive decree or an active decree, it's still all under his direction and design. And the crazy thing is that in all of the teachings on the Calvinist view of the Divine Decrees, we end up finding what Hutson writes in this book. And that is, the decrees of God is purely inferential, resting upon human reasoning and not Bible evidence. And also commenting on common passages used to support the extreme sovereignty of Calvinism, Hutson follows with these words: that God does as he wishes in heaven and on earth hardly proves that he has foreordained every event without exception from before creation. The only way to make such a hermeneutical leap is to approach the text with an agenda. And that's what you end up finding in Deconstructing Calvinism, is that the way that all of these proof passages end up supporting Calvinism is when you approach these passages with an already pre-built agenda that comes from the Calvinist worldview. This is really strong stuff in this book, and just as strong was the chapter on Jesus and Calvinism. While Calvinists like James White would love to paint Jesus as the first Calvinist, Hutson brings out many statements given by Jesus that just make no sense in a Calvinist world. We read that Jesus came to seek and save the lost, when Calvinists would say he came to seek and save the elect. Jesus' words of condemnation on the cities who rejected his prophetic teaching and his miraculous signs, where he denounced them for their unbelief. That condemnation is nonsensical from the viewpoint of Calvinism. If all men are born with an unbelief that is incapable of believing in Jesus without a prior work of regeneration, why would one generation receive a more tolerable condemnation than another on the day of judgment for their unbelief? They are all blind. They are all dead to the work of God. As the Calvinists would like to say, they are like corpses. So who cares how many miracles are done in front of a corpse? Who cares how wonderful and insightful the teaching was in front of a dead man? They can't respond regardless to the work of Christ unless the Holy Spirit gives them life first. Jesus also condemns the false teachers for keeping people out of his kingdom. But that makes no sense. When you live in a world where there is nothing man can do to either bring someone into the kingdom or keep them out of the kingdom if God has elected for them to be there, it all depends upon God's decree, his election. For Jesus to condemn the religious leaders for keeping unbelievers out is really ascribing the work of God to those false teachers, because it is God is the one who determines who is and is not in the kingdom. And those religious leaders really play no part. Or if they play any part, they're just serving the role of being instruments of God to keep unbelievers from having an opportunity to believe. And Hutson continued with even more in the book, and it's all really good stuff, in my view, to show how there are so many times and in so many ways that Jesus speaks in a manner that is contrary to popular Calvinism. If you have never read a book that deconstructed the proof passages of Calvinism to show that there are really no proof passages for Calvinism, then this book would be a great place to start. And if you've already read other books that have done similar work on the 5 points of Calvinism, some of the stuff in the body of this book will be familiar ground as you read through it before. But I would encourage you to read Deconstructing Calvinism just for the beginning chapter on Divine Decrees and also the end on how Jesus is against Calvinism. I found all of that information to be very useful, and I definitely appreciated the admonition to be Christ-like and to be kind to all people, including Calvinists, that was given by Hutson at the end of the book. So grab your copy of Deconstructing Calvinism with a Rev Reads recommendation.